The most common way that tech companies successfully position is they find an underserved subsegment of the market, and then they attempt to dominate that subsegment and then push out from there. So I can give you an example. I worked at a company called Jana Systems, and at the time, this was quite a while ago, so Salesforce was a small company at that point and only selling to the very low end of the market. But the gorilla in that space at the time was a big company in Silicon Valley called Siebel. And so they were a fantastic company, $2 billion revenue, fastest company to ever get to $1 billion revenue in the history of Silicon Valley. Amazing success story. They were positioned as enterprise CRM. They were the absolute kings of enterprise CRM. We had a product that was also enterprise CRM. So we would position ourselves as enterprise CRM. And so not surprisingly, we would get a meeting with a customer and the customer would say, okay, so you're enterprise CRM, they're enterprise CRM, how are you better? And the answer to that question was, we simply weren't better than them. We had 2 million revenue. They had 2 billion revenue. They had 400 customers. We had 6. They had thousands of employees. I was employee 26 or something. We were just no comparison at all. However, we had a feature that they could not copy that was really interesting. And we thought it would be really valuable to customers. We didn't really understand the value of it for customers, but we always showed it in meetings. So we'd go in, we'd show the thing, and it was this neat feature. And we'd say, hey, here's the feature. It's really great. And customers would look at us and say, hey, that looks cool. What do we do with that? And we'd say, anything you want. And then the customer would say, okay, well, that's confusing. What else you got? And then we'd say, well, we're really cheap if you want us to be really cheap because we're desperate to close business. How we got out of that mess and eventually landed on positioning that was really good for us is we sold a deal to an investment bank. And it was kind of by accident. We hired a sales rep that had a relationship with somebody very senior at the investment bank. That we did a good pitch in there. We showed him our magical feature. And what that customer taught us is that feature was actually very, very valuable to investment banks and the way that they wanted to manage relationships inside the bank. Once we figured that out, then it was like, okay, we actually have a feature that's really, really valuable for a subsegment of this big market. And we knew at the time, Siebel couldn't copy us on that feature. So we narrowed down the positioning, and instead of saying we were enterprise CRM, we were CRM for investment banks.